Hi guys, for today my project is going to be on histology. This is a section where I feel like I'm having the most problem trying to figure out which layers which, and then what are we even looking at. So I hope that this will help you guys as well. So for our practical in regards to the histology, we are supposed to be able to name the organ, name the structure, and name the layers. These are the organs we're going to go through, and we will go ahead and name the layers and the structures that we see within these organs. The first organ we have is the trachea. With the trachea, what we have to remember is if he zooms out, the trachea is going to be a more circular shape organ just because of the trachea cartilage makes the trachea into a whole circle, versus when it's with the esophagus, we'll see the esophagus that is squished a little bit more. With the trachea, we are supposed to know three main layers, which is the mucosa layer, submucosa layer, and then the adventitia layer. With the mucosa layer, that is going to be closest to the lumen. So if he's pointing closer to this area right here, we'll know that he is pointing to the mucosa layer. In the mucosa layer, we are going to find pseudostratified columnar epithelia, which are these here that you see. We're also going to be finding goblet cells and cilia, which are the little hairs right on the top. On the second layer, we have the submucosa layer, which you will see areolar connective tissue, and you will also be seeing some submucosa glands in that area, which is somewhere right in here. The third and final layer of the trachea is going to be the adventitia. This one we are going to see the hyaline cartilage, which is right on the bottom. You can see the little chondrocytes. It almost looks like a shiny layer, and that's what we want to see. He can also, for the adventitia layer, show us the trachealis muscle. So if it's looks more like a muscle, then that's what we will be seeing, and that's probably the structure that he's going to be asking us. Okay, the next organ we have for histology is going to be the lungs. In the lungs, we are going to find three different structures. You have the bronchus, the bronchioli, and then the alveoli. The bronchus is going to be the bigger one that you see here. The bronchioli is going to be this one here, and then you have the alveoli, which are the little ones that are on here. This picture here is a zoom in part of the bronchus, which is the one right here that you see. On that one, closest to the lumen, of course, you're always going to have the mucus layer, which is the one up here. Then you have the submucosa layer, and then you have the adventitia layer, which is the one all the way on the bottom here. In this picture here, we have a bronchioli, which is the one right here. And then these lines here are the alveoli. So those are going to be a little bit easier to be able to identify because it's only one layer, which is the simple squamous epithelia layer. For the bronchioli, which is this one here, a good key point that I remember is it only has two layers. So if it's a little bit on the skinnier side, thinner side, then we know it's a bronchioli. If we have just one layer, then it's the alveoli. And then the bronchus, which is the bigger one, if it has three layers, then we know it's the bronchus on that one. For the bronchioli, this one has a mucus layer, and then it's surrounded by smooth muscle. We are now moving forward with the histology of the digestive system. The first one, we have the esophagus. With the esophagus, if he zooms out, the best way to be able to identify it is that the lumen is all squished together. So that's the best tip that I can give because that's what's helping me remember. In regards to the layers, we have 4 different layers for the esophagus. We have the mucosa layer, submucosa layers, muscularis externa, and then the adventitia layer. And within those layers, then we have different structures that we need to also know. I zoomed in a little bit more into the picture so that we can really see the layers. The first one you have is the mucosa layer, and in the mucosa layer, we're going to find non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelia, because remember, this is our throat. Food is going down here, so we always want to make sure that we're protecting it. The second layer is going to be the submucosa layer. We're going to be seeing some submucosa glands in this area right here. The third layer, we have the muscularis externa. Within that layer, we're going to see two different layers. You have the inner circle layer here, and then you have the outer circle layer here. And then the last layer would be the adventitia layer, which is the one that you see all the way at the end. Up next, we have the small intestine, which will be the jejunum. For this one, we are also going to be seeing 4 different layers. We have the mucosa layer, the lamina propria, submucosa, and muscularis externa. Within the mucosa layer, we are going to be seeing 4 different structures. We're going to see the simple columnar epithelia tissue. We are going to be seeing goblet cells, villi, and intestinal cribs. In the second layer, which is the lamina propria layer, and then in the submucosa, we're going to be seeing submucosal glands. And in the muscularis externa, we're going to be seeing inner circular layer and then the outer longitudinal layer. Up next, we have the liver. The liver is going to have quite a bit in these layers. The first one would be the lobules, which you would see kind of the marks here. In the lobule, you'll see the central vein. And then we also have in this picture here, we have the hepatic triad. So you'll be seeing the bile duct there. You see a portal vein and the hepatic artery in there as well. This picture here is a different view of the liver. This one shows us the hepatocytes here. That is a little bit better than the last picture I had shown. It also shows the triad, hepatic triad here. Then you have a hepatic artery there and a bile duct there as well. The next organ we have for histology is the pancreas. For the pancreas, we just need to know 2 different structures. The first one would be the islets of Langerhans, which you see here in the corner. And then the next one would just be the pancreatic acinus, which you see here in these little areas. Up next, we have the kidney. For the kidney, I have 3 different pictures. One is the kidney zoomed out, and then 2 are more of a zoom in picture where we can be able to tell the different structures that we have. We need to know 4 different layers for the kidney. We need to know the renal cortex, the renal medulla, the renal calyx, and the renal pelvis for the kidney. In the zoom out kidney picture, this one here, we'll be able to see the renal cortex, which is the outer layer, and then the renal pelvis here. On this one here, we'll be able to see, this is the renal cortex, but it's zoomed in. And in this, we'll be able to see the glomerulus. You see the glomerulus capsule there. And then in this one here, we'll be able to see the convoluted tubes. And then we'll also be able to see the loop of Henle there as well. For the loop of Henle, which is right here in the corner, it is more of a rope, it looks like, that is twisted. And then you can just see a bunch of dots, which is the nucleus on there. The next organ we have is the ureter. This is going to be in our renal system with the kidneys and the bladder. For this one, the biggest difference, and it looks a lot like the esophagus, so What I realized is that the mucosa layer for the ureter is a transitional epithelial tissue. So that's the biggest difference between the ureter and the esophagus. For the ureter, we are going to learn 4 different layers. We have the mucosa layer, the submucosa layer, and the muscularis externa, and the adventitia. So here, I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. This layer here would be the mucosa layer. Then you have the submucosa layer, the muscularis externa, which is made out of smooth muscle, and then you have the adventitia layer, which is a dense irregular connective tissue. Next, we have the bladder. For the bladder, we are going to need to know also 4 different layers. We have the mucosa layer, which is the one right on the top here. We have submucosa layer. That is going to be made out of the moderately dense irregular connective tissue. Then we have the detrusor smooth muscle here, and then we have adventitia, which is always that last layer there. Okay, now moving over to the histology for the reproductive system. For the male reproductive system, we are going to have the testes. In the testes, we are going to find the seminiferous tubules developing spermatides in sperm. This is a zoom out version of the testes here. And then this one is a more zoomed in version. So here we can be able to see all the spermatides in the sperm that is developing. Within the testes, we are going to find the epididymis. In this one, we need 2 different layers. We need the sperm, and then to know the stereocilia. The stereocilia is going to be within the lumen of this here. It has cilia in it, so the best way to remember is the little hairs in there. So that would be my biggest advice for that. The last one for the reproductive system is the females, and we need to know what the ovaries look like. For histology, the first one is the different layers, which is the cortex, and then we need to know the medulla, which is inside here in the middle. Within the cortex, we will have the primordial follicles, which are the ones you see up here. They're the smaller ones because they're the primary oocytes that we need to know. And then we need to know the Graafian follicles. Those are the second one. And within the Graafian, we have a secondary oocyte and a follicular cells and the antrum that we need to know. So this one here is a secondary oocyte. This little bubble that you see here would be the antrum. And you have also a couple here. And then that it right there, those little ones there are a primary follicle, and then that you have the smallest ones on the edges, the primordial follicles there. And this is all within the cortex. Alrighty guys, that is all for the histology. I hope that it helped being able to see one at a time, going through the layers and the structures so that we are able to name those for the lab quiz. Thank you guys.